The following is a Roll Poll production. All right. This is the David Hensley emergency pod. No, welcome to the Motor City Metrics podcast here at TigersMLReport.com. I am Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Mike and Uper. Chris Brown should be along momentarily. Also, Ashley will be joining us this evening as well. Yes, Steve. Ashley will be with us in a moment. Thank you.
Today is the first day for the rest of your life post Alex Bregman.
Yes.
So there you go.
Yes.
Day one and counting.
Look, we're going to get into our opinions obviously about it, but before we jump into it, I'm relieved, and I'm not saying whether I absolutely had to have Bregman or I hated him and I didn't want him. I'm just relieved that we can move on. That's why we didn't have a show ultimately last week. It feels like, and there were some things I wasn't feeling too well, but it also just kind of felt like, what else is there to say? Until Bregman signs with the Tigers or elsewhere, like it really seems like that was what they're all like. They weren't going to do anything else until that happened. So it's been a ticking clock for a long time. I'm relieved that it's over.
We were all like the family with the kid who was taken hostage and we're waiting for the ransom call. Is Alex Bregman going to ransom what's he going to want for ransom for our offseason?
By the way, I'm not mad that Ashley's not here, Steve. So calm down. That's just the way I am. That's if you've listened to the podcast, I'm very expressive a lot. So that's just the first question was, where's Ashley? She'll be here momentarily.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, anyway, hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Yes, it's over.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
What's over now? Oh, the Bregman thing? Yeah.
It's the first day of the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I started a new job this week and I actually have to work. Unlike before, and so it's like been a kind of a really busy week for baseball and for the Tigers, and I've been out of all of it. If Raj doesn't text me, I don't know. So
yeah, it's like it's funny too because like it is a thing where I know Chris when he gets in this super focus mode, so I know enough to go. All right, well I'm just gonna I'll text him. Normally 9 times out of 10 he goes, yeah, I already knew that, but then he's like, what happened? So that's when I know things are different.
Yeah. Whoops. Hi, Ashley.
Hi. I'm so sorry on my
Hello?
webcam.
It's okay.
This is like a 10-year-old MacBook, so sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
It's all good. It's all good. But I was thinking about this for a while now. This idea of if he was not going to come to Detroit, what was going to happen? What would be the outrage and what have you? And so I put together, I think sums it up. I don't know if you saw this or not, Mike, but this I think sums up the energy and vibe the Tiger fans are feeling right about now about the whole thing.
Oh, the Crawford boxes.
Yeah. No, there you go.
I feel like
Good beat.
People have been pretty okay with it. Like most people are like, I would not have wanted to have signed him for $40 million.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's let's just address the monkey in the room, or elephant in the room, if you will. Elephant in the room. Essentially, look, the thing is, the Tigers put together a competitive offer, and 6 years, $171 million with an opt-out after 2026, which means that it's in that Tarek Skubal window. And he is going to get the same kind of amount of money that Aaron Judge is going to make per year. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any problem with somebody chasing money. And there's a thing where people are just like, well, he's greedy. No, look, if somebody's offering me $40 million a year to play baseball, yeah, I'm going to take it. I'm not stupid here. But the optics of it all look, just the fact that he didn't sign until February 12th, all those things being said. Some of the other optics, like, for example, some people are saying that, well, the Tigers, this is not their best offseason. I mean, the Tigers offseason's been C+B, but to say they're losers in the offseason, Talking Baseball from John Boy Media said that, which was, anyway, and actually, I do like what you said. Like, it's not, it is clickbaitish, but
It's rage bait.
Rage
It's meant to make people mad and engage with the post.
yeah.
That's how you end up with the White Sox having a good like winners of the offseason by trading away Garrett Crochet. Like what? I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It's Ashley's exactly right. It's whatever you can do to get people to interact with it. And so you show some good ones, you show some ones that don't make any sense, and then people go, what? And they start complaining. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think I tend to agree with you, Raj, that it's probably a B-, C+ offseason. Like they made, I mean, we talked about it. Like they needed to get a right-handed bat, and they got one, but it's kind of redundant. Not redundant, but it doesn't necessarily put them over the top because you're probably taking Torkelson out of the lineup. But Flaherty was a great signing, I think. And they've gotten a couple of really nice bullpen arms, or at least interesting bullpen arms. And, the Cobb signing is already looking a little iffy, but I don't know. So there you go. It's that's Scott Harris's track record. These, 3 seasons, they've signed two starting pitchers each time. And each time one of them works out and the other one doesn't. So,
yeah.
Well, he signed 2, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, too, like the Nolan Arenado thing came out today, too, that the Cardinals GM basically saying that he's going to stay with the team. I mean, that's just could be lip service, just about that. But he does have the no trade clause, as Matt said in the chat. And Tigers are not in his no trade list. And John Morosi said that the Yankees and Tigers are possible destinations. I look, at the end, look, if this makes me sound like a homer, I'm not trying to sound like a homer. But yeah, C+, B is an offseason, but for once, Tigers actually put it together. The fact that they had Evan Petzold have the offer immediately out there quickly also goes to show they were ready to. They've been sitting on this for a while.
Yeah, you get the feeling that offer was made to Bregman 2 months ago, a month ago, like a long time ago, and he just kept waiting and waiting for something better, and eventually just took the shorter, larger AAV. So it was basically like, he just didn't want to come here. And what can you do? You can't do anything about that.
Well, it's really interesting to me that a lot of people are calling him greedy and those other things. It's his one chance at free agency during really his prime, right? I mean, this is his last real big shot to cash in. So you can't really blame him for waiting until he got the exact thing he wanted. And $40 million a year is hard to say no. I mean, what are you going to – come on. Especially, I realize the Tigers may have offered $171,000, but, if he has anybody good taking care of his money, and I'm assuming he does, getting all that money up front, that's going to make that even more valuable possibly than the 171, right? Or at least close. So I think it was the right move for Bregman. I don't blame him a bit if that was the offer. I usually, for the Tigers' sake, I'll say this. Usually I make fun of teams who say they finished second on a player or say we tried, right? Mm-hmm. Because we don't usually know very much about how much did they really try. But I think we can take some belief that 6-year 171 offer was there because it's been pretty widely reported and nobody put a lot of sketchiness to it. So the Tigers definitely made a very positive offer that a lot of players probably would have jumped at. But the Red Sox, they're playing with funny money and they can afford to do whatever they want. And they did this. So Tigers go to plan B and they have some options.
I think it says a lot too that we were in the final few teams that were kind of in the running for him. Like I knew, a lot of people talk about Chris Ilitch and he won't spend and blah, blah, blah. But I feel like, I don't know. I feel like that kind of squashed that for me because it's like, we were willing. We were there. We were willing. He just didn't accept the offer. So,
I mean, but that kind of gets into moral victories. And at the end of the day, the Tigers were trying to upgrade their offense and they didn't. I really don't like the fact that he took this long to make his decision because now, I mean, pitchers and catchers are reporting. So it's like, are they going to find somebody else? Or is it just like, was there no fallback? You know what I mean? Like there's a difference between not adding Bregman and then not adding anyone else instead. So you're not even upgrading at all, and you're not like you know what I mean. Like you're not adding anything. It was all or nothing, and that's why I would put it, like as a C+ versus a B- at this point. But I mean, obviously, something else could happen. Just I'm really upset that it took this long because I don't know if he's going to sign anyone else.
It's like our plan B and plan C kind of disappeared way before Bregman even made his decision, right? We had Santander, we had Hassan Kim we were looking at, and we held out for Bregman, and it came back and bit us.
This reminds me a lot of like college football recruiting, where you're down to the wire for a star quarterback, and then he just goes to Bama. You're like, well, I guess we're not going to have a quarterback this year. It's like, I mean, Bregman was the kind of the perfect fit, that great veteran leader, plays a position you need, right-handed hitter. It all made sense. It made sense for them to try as long as possible to get him. I mean, you could argue that they could have upped the offer, I guess, but I wonder if it would have mattered.
Yeah.
It's hard to know. And even still, the 6 years is kind of surprising given what we know about Scott Harris so far. He hasn't handed out a deal in his career, I think, more than 3 years. So, I mean, they were willing to break the mold with Bregman, and it just didn't work out. So, got to move on. They've got options. Rod, you wrote that piece about what they do next. That was very nice.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's in Mitchell, and Matt has said it, and there's a lot of people that have said it in the chat. He didn't, plain and simple, didn't want to be here. And if he wanted to be here, he would have made that reunion with Hinch possible. But look, he wants $40 million. Hey, more power to him. Look, I mean, and there's people saying, well, the ball, Lynn Henning, I love Lynn Henning, but sometimes he is the wet blanket of the media sometimes. Oh, well, it's a stadium played a factor. Yes. Well, if you catch Miguel Cabrera on a good day in the media, down in the locker room, he'll tell you that Comerica Park's dimensions suck. But he also had a triple crown here, and the only first person to do that in 40 odd years. That being said, that excuse, I'm so sick of hearing that. They've moved the fences back twice since 2000. This is not the same stadium, this cavernous wonder when they were attempting to sign Juan Gonzalez. I'm so sick of hearing that crap. It's just, come on.
I don't like the whole money situation. I just keep seeing this, and I don't mean to straw man. It's just what I see on the internet. But I mean, people are saying like they didn't like it for the price. I mean, I think it was what the Tigers gave him. He's what we're looking at anywhere between you hope for like a 4-WAR player, right? Mm-hmm. That's pretty much the going. It's actually less than the going rate of a 4-WAR player. So I just feel like I want to dispel a narrative. I don't know if you guys agree, but I don't think I don't understand that opinion. Like that really, it was almost a bargain if you look at it obviously it's not that black and white, but based on expectations, that was a fine deal. I don't think it's a franchise hindering deal.
Yeah, Chris, didn't you kind of in your article, you did a really good job of hindering his value or talk about his value, didn't you? In your article, kind of like where he was?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. It basically, that was just kind of my, subjective grouping of Bregman-like players called Bregman, who like just looking at what they did, players like him through this age and what they did in the next 6 years. And yeah, and on average, they produced, I think, like 125 million worth of WAR, if you will. So, we talk about you kind of bake in the last 2 years is going to be not necessarily worth it, but you hope that you've made your hay in the first 4. And then there's also the possibility that he's just one of those guys who continues to play well into his 30s. We don't see a lot of that anymore, but it used to happen kind of fairly often. Like you look, Ryan Sandberg had some of his best years when he was in his 30s, and Paul Molitor and all these other guys that are kind of Bregman-esque. So you don't know. I think you kind of touched on this earlier. It's, you get the $40 million this year. He has the chance to opt out. So then to beat the Tigers offer next year, you got to get 5 years and 130 million, right? Basically, which seems unlikely. But if he does what Nolan Arenado did in his age 31 season, which was like, his last hurrah, it was like a 7-WAR season, then yeah, I could see Bregman turning around and getting more money next year. But even if he doesn't, he just gets the 120 million, that's probably just fine.
Yeah, I think he's doing fine. It'd be interesting. It sounds like he's going to play second base. You know, and Boston has that farm system. They got a lot of young guys coming. They have a couple great hitters in place already. You know, they have the money to go out and get pitching when they feel they need it. Maybe he just thought that was a better situation. You know, let's face it. How many World Series have the Red Sox won since the Tigers won one? You know, maybe if all those things factor in, you know, maybe he just likes the East Coast. There's a lot of ways to go with it.
That division, man, like fighting the AL Central however many times is a lot different than the AL East. You know what I mean? So,
yeah,
I guess we got the smaller dimension. Sorry, Chris.
No, I mean, you never know what interests a player. You know, he's got a couple championships. He's you know, what's he want to do? Does he want to go down in Red Sox history? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? I'm sure he'll explain his thinking at some point. He won't explain why he didn't pick the Tigers, but he'll explain why he went for the Red Sox. So, yeah, whatever. But as we said, Tigers move on. There are still a couple random bets out there if they want. Jose Iglesias is still out there. I think Paul DeJong is still out there. I thought he had signed somewhere, but it looks like he's still out there. Mark Canha is still out there.
I was literally going to say when we talked about the offseason, like, I'm glad about their offseason that they didn't have a Mark Canha-like signing. But, you know, now that you mention it, it might end up being the plan D or plan E, no other choice kind of situation.
Justin Turner. No, yeah, and you know, sometimes these things just work out, right? Like you can just go. You don't have to go back too far to when the Tigers had a deal with the Yankees for Jack Flaherty, and it fell through, and so they had to settle for the other deal, right? Settle for this guy who played shortstop for you and got you to the playoffs, and this catching prospect who's got a ton of power and is suddenly a top 60, top 50 prospect in baseball. Like sometimes it just works out. Maybe Bregman is no good, and you've given room for Vierling and Young and Malloy and all these other guys. You've got more at bats for them, and something works out there. I'm not normally like optimist, but it wouldn't shock me if something like that happened.
If there's something to the fact that Jace Young was injured, right, when we saw him last year, if he comes back healthy and he's, you know, X amount better than what we saw from the left side, and the way Ibanez hits from the right side against lefties, and then, you know, mix in Vierling as well, I'm sure maybe even for the lion's share, I don't see how third base is a sinkhole. You know, I think Hinch can make it work. I don't really believe they need to go out and just target a third baseman for the sake of having a new third baseman in a trade. So,
I mean, I wouldn't do it just to do it, but the simple fact is I'm not super confident about anybody's defense at that spot. So, you know, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I'm not trying to like say that you're wrong, but I also just mean you don't really have anybody ready for the MLB level in the entire organization that like plays a good third base, you know? So it's just a weird thing that happens. Obviously, like I feel like it was years that the Tigers just never had a good shortstop ever, no matter what. And it almost feels like Javi Baez kind of brought those times back a little bit, but it kind of feels like we have third base now. And it's right now. Obviously we have third basemen that aren't quite MLB ready. Like I'm not trying to do that. Just that's where I see the logic in going to get a third base. And I'm not trying to overpay, but maybe even league average defense I'd love to see it.
I was looking at some defensive stats earlier, and I was looking at like Trey Sweeney's scouting reports on Baseball America talking about his range. And I was like, I mean, at least the silver lining, because we know Young doesn't have the best range in the world. At least the silver lining is Sweeney has pretty good range. I mean, based on his scouting reports. So, you know, not that I want to sacrifice that defense at third base, but I was like, well, here's the silver lining.
Yeah, and you know, he graded out well.
And hopefully if Young can, you know, produce enough offensively and Vierling, you know, maybe it makes up for it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe I'm just
options.
wishful thinking. I'm coping is what I'm doing.
They've got options. You know, it's funny how I had kind of Javi Baez had just left my thinking. He was just gone. And then I read, you know, Evan Petzold did after the Bregman non-signing. He did like, okay, here's what the opening day roster could look like, and it was Javi Baez as your starting shortstop. And I was like, oh, That's true.
Oh,
He's still there. Yes. Unless I was just kind of thinking like, yeah, they'll put him on the 60-day IL and we don't have to see him until June or something. But yeah, I mean, there's a scenario where Javi Baez is your starting shortstop and they put Sweeney at third, or Sweeney's your shortstop and Baez is playing
Has
third.
Sweeney
I
played
don't know.
third before? That's something I didn't look up.
I think he played a little bit in the minors, and I thought early on the scouting reports were that he, just because he was a bigger guy, that people thought he might have to move to third. But the one thing that didn't grade out terribly well in his big league stint was his arm strength. So I don't know if that would be an issue, but he didn't seem like, I never thought his arm was like, oh, that's weak. It just, he seemed to overcome it with, good timing and having a good mental clock, as it were.
It's going to be very entertaining, as every spring we break it down, where are the battles for roster spots and so on. It's going to be fascinating to see what Baez looks like post-surgery, if we see any tangible difference. And then, of course, you have to factor in it's just spring ball, and who knows what the hell that really means when the real thing starts. So, but yeah, I'm in no rush to see it, but I think he could be the opening day shortstop. It doesn't take much to see it happening.
I think, like you said, Chris, I've kind of just accepted, like you said, Javi Baez kind of left to your mind. I've just kind of accepted that position is just not going to be good for a while.
Yeah, I don't know. It does.
It's just like, well, we're not going to do anything about shortstop, so.
Yeah, it like put a slight damper on I was like, oh, yeah, I could just kind of picture them getting off to a slow start again, but I don't know. Who knows? That's why you play the games. But yeah, like to You's point, like if every year somebody has an awesome spring, you're like, all right, it's going to work out. And then, whoops, like Parker Meadows had a great spring last year.
Yes, he did. And
then, it didn't work out. But I don't know. There's other things that have been happening. It's been a busy week, right? Like I missed, they made a trade with Tampa again. Mason Englert off to Tampa. So they got, who was the other guy they got?
Drew Summers.
Drew Summers. Lefty. Reliever.
And I have to look. I wasn't joking about how I was just completely out of it this week, so I have to look. I don't know how old he is. 24-year-old.
24.
He's my kind of guy. He's a hefty lefty.
Oh, yeah, all right. A tugboat.
When he drafted, he was 6'3", 300. He had a decent rookie year. Yeah, it does.
He knows his way around a pepperoni.
Well,
I respect. He had a 10.83 K per 9. But he had like a 3.3 walks per 9. Mm-hmm. I was looking up some stats earlier. And then that was in high A. And then in low A, he had 66 strikeouts in 44 innings. So he's a strikeout guy. He's swinging miss guy. He's got a low arm slot. So
interesting. Yeah, it looks like he's running into some bad luck with ground balls and bad defense. 68% ground ball rate in high A. That'll work.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting arm, whatever. Like that. It's funny. Everybody's like, oh, Tampa, they're going to fix Englert or fix Faedo. And I'm like, well, the Tigers probably see something with these guys, right? Like, I don't worry about the Tigers getting hoodwinked on pitchers anymore. Like, they see something they like and they think they can work with it. So that's fine.
Chris Fetter around.
Yeah. Whoever signed off on Tyler Holton might have signed off on Drew Summers, So,
well, yeah, and even we've talked about before, some of the things that didn't quite work out. Like they saw something and you said they just couldn't unlock it. And then he eventually did unlock it with the Rays and was amazing last year. And it was like, I think the Tigers had an idea there. They just couldn't. I think he was out of options. But I don't know.
Speaking of ex-Tigers, I heard the Pirates unlocked something in Joey Wentz, apparently.
Oh, well, that'd be
a friend of mine works for the Pirates, and I made a little sly comment, and he was like, actually, we kind of worked with him, and he wasn't bad. I was like, oh, that's good.
I always liked Joey Wentz, but he always seemed kind of like checkpointy in his delivery. He's a little bit like Matt Manning, like it wasn't fluid. It was like something was like you're just thinking about it too much. But maybe they can, maybe they give him some Buddhist lessons or something like that. And he's one with the world, and he's breathing through his third eye, and he's throwing strikes. I'd be happy for him. I never, like I said, I kind of liked him. He had a pretty rough year. And what was it, 23?
Yeah,
like a 7 ERA in like
I think
95
the most
innings.
common words with him were 2 out and nobody on. Or excuse me, 2 on and nobody out. That was his claim to fame.
Yeah,
Yeah,
6.9 ERA and 105 innings. Whew.
He flashed, but I
Yeah.
think that when he first made it onto the roster, I could see what they saw in him, and he was young, but he couldn't ever keep things together. Even just in the bad outings, you'd see like a couple batter stretches or even an inning or two where he'd strike out the side, and then here he comes back, like you said.
Yeah, and
nobody out.
They tried just about every possible role with him, right? Like he was a starter, or they were like, all right, well, put him in leverage relief, and like, well, maybe not, maybe a fifth inning reliever, maybe a swing man, maybe a long reliever, and it just, but
Hope
we've
it
seen
works
that.
for him, though.
You see that happen all the time, right? Relievers, they don't do anything, they disappear, they come back 2 years later, and they're amazing. I don't know. It was funny, like John Brebbia, who the Tigers signed this week. Apparently, it was a name I remember from like 4 years ago, but I was like, he doesn't pitch anymore, right? And I was like, oh, he's been pitching all this time. Like, where was I? I thought he must have been a career or something, but that's another kind of random, like, I don't think anybody ever even mentioned him at all.
No.
Like, not with the Tigers, not with anybody.
I tell you.
Well, beards are nice. But
I was looking at, actually, I was watching on the MLB film room. I was watching some of the home runs. He gave up a home run to McKinstry and Colt Keith last August. One of them was on a hanging slider and the other one was on a hanging fastball. And then I was watching all the other home runs he gave up, and they were all pretty interesting choices of location.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at he threw 3 changeups last year and then 515 sliders and 476 four-seamers. I was just looking at Savant. And the fastball played really well. 172 batting average against. The slider, 322 batting average against with a 587 slugging.
Yeah, I saw that slugging yesterday. I was like,
yeah. It's like, he must have just thrown his slider right over the heart of the plate constantly. So
he did. I watched the videos.
Well, there you go. So I don't know. And he was on the White Sox, right? Like,
yeah.
So
I'm gonna say that matters a little bit.
Yeah.
I think what Bless You Boys tweeted. We were talking about that yesterday, and they said, I don't think the White Sox were very bright with how they managed him.
Yeah. Did he start on Atlanta? No, he signed with Atlanta late in the year and actually looked like he had a nice little stretch. I'm looking 6 innings. It's only 6 innings, right? But 2.70 ERA, only 2 earned runs and 6 2/3, 9 strikeouts, 2 walks. Yeah.
I was looking up his splits, his lefty-righty splits, and it was interesting because he held lefties to a 235 average, but he gave up 8 home runs to lefties. Then he gave up 3 home runs to righties, but held them to a 270 average.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. You would think that. I guess if you're just throwing sliders to lefties, there's a good chance. If you're not burying it in the back foot, you're leaving it over the heart of the plate, and it's just breaking right into their barrel. So maybe the Tigers have a plan for him with a new pitch. Maybe it's just location based. But again, I'm not terribly worried about their pitching decisions. I feel like they have a plan. They don't just go, we'll take them. So
I was looking at they both look like they're pretty consistent in shape, and they have like 10 miles per hour velo separation. So that's something to work with, right? I mean, the fastball had 103 stuff plus. Maybe there's something there. Even if it's just to face, face just righties or just left. I don't really know what the plan would be there with the whole home run debacle, but sure,
well above average chase and strikeout rate. So something to work with. That's that breaking ball run value of -18 jumps out. But again,
I saw that too. I was man.
We'll figure it out.
Do you know what actually goes into run value?
So I think that's from, what do they used to call those? Linear weights.
Yeah.
Which was it's basically the actual outcomes when you throw a certain pitch, right? On average in certain counts. It's something that I looked into years ago. Because you'll see it like Fangraphs will have like the value. Everybody's pitches have a certain value, and I do think it's just sort of relative to league average for the most part. But I don't have a great answer for you there.
With Brebbia, it just really adds on to the bullpen options that they're going to carry with them this year. They have just so many guys. I hope enough of them have options where they can keep them around. Once some cuts start being made. But really, if they can keep the number of guys that they have, you could see the Tigers being able to at some point flip the switch and go back to the pitching chaos method at points of the year. I'm not saying they're going to sustain it for 162 games or even 82 games, but I just think they have enough relief options where they can cycle guys from Toledo and back and make some of those things work.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who they can't do that with. Brebbia, I don't think,
Right.
Canely, you can't do it with. Everybody else, I think, might still have options.
I think so.
It's
A good chunk of them anyway.
they put Lang is back on the 60-day IL, so won't be seeing him. But yeah, that's one of the things about being one of the youngest teams in baseball, right? Like they have a ton of options, and it'll be really interesting to see what the bullpen looks like on opening day, because I don't know if they're going to carry 3 lefties, if they're going to bring Hannafy up again, or if he's back in Toledo. Like, I don't think they're. I'm trying to think of who was really facing a roster cut. It's like they got rid of Faedo, so they didn't have to worry about that. But I don't know who else they have to worry about keeping.
Yeah, there can't be many. I mean, we must be maybe missing one, but there's just those guys aren't there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a neat situation. It's going to be very fascinating to see how Hinch and Harris and whoever's making these decisions, how they manipulate that throughout the season.
Yeah, I'm checking the options now. McKinstry has no more options, but that's been the case for the last 3 years, right?
Yeah. He's Rasputin. He keeps hanging in there.
Jahmai Jones, but I'm not expecting him to make the team. Matt Gage and Jordan Belazovic.
Yeah.
Dietrich Enns. So that, the minor league guys that they brought in, they're going to end up with like 5 big leaguers pitching in Toledo. It's probably in the rotation. So the worst things they have.
Okay. So what did all of you think of Spencer Torkelson's quotes today? Both the ones that, about he knows he has to do better, and he's working at it. And then the second one where he's not too thrilled with modern technology.
Well, I don't know. Where was the source of the one where he didn't want to use the fancy batting cages and stuff?
I don't have the source in front of me. I saw it in several spots, so I'm assuming it's real.
So did I. Yeah, I just didn't know. And the other one was just a media scrum, right, where he said he wasn't expecting what happened with Torres and Keith, but he is also not surprised because he hasn't performed.
Yep.
Which was that's I don't know, he's always seemed like a stand-up guy in that regard. Like I think Cody Stavenhagen went down and interviewed him in Toledo last year, and you could just tell he was bummed out and stuff like that. But he's always been willing to talk to people about it, and that's fine, right? The other stuff, I don't know.
Can I read you this quote directly? So,
yes, please.
Go for it.
So it says, Tigers have a brand new climate-controlled batting cage. This is from Detroit News.
Okay.
With all the bells and whistles, he could have his swing mechanics analyzed both biomechanically and metrically and get every kind of reading he'd want. He wants none of that. He doesn't even want to watch video. Quote, that's not me. That's not the way I roll. I'm pretty old school in the fact that, that felt good. The ball flight looked good. That must have worked. End quote.
Here's the thing. Speaking as someone who has been in his corner, and maybe will be the last guy standing on Torkelson Island, right? I'll be the last one. Maybe I'll take that. Most of the time, players get criticized for giving pat answers and the easy answer and tell us nothing. In this case, he probably should have done that. I think that he would have been better off, at least PR wise, of not turning down a method of getting better. Okay. Even if he doesn't really believe in it, okay, don't do it. Don't tell us you're not doing it. I think he should have kept that one to himself. Now, whether he should or not, hey, I would think he should, because we saw what the struggles were. Get some help. However, if you don't want to do, if he's dead set on that and he just wants to go the old school route and I can figure it out on my own with, just spit and swing hard. Okay, fine. But boy, I just think that it's hard to put a good light on that subject for him on what he said.
You can't say that when you're fighting for a roster spot. Like, you got to have a little self-awareness. I don't know. That's just, it just seems like he's completely unaware of the situation is what that feels like. Like you said, even if it's not true, I don't know.
It reminded me of when I have a friend who's a scout, and it reminded me of when we talk about like kind of like the older guys. We call them the crack of the bat guys. Mm-hmm. And I know he's watching, so hi, friend. But it reminded me when we talk about the crack of the bat guy, that you're just like, oh, it's a nice crack of the bat, but like they don't want to look at any sort of analytics or metrics. That's kind of what it made me think of, which is like in a way really funny, but also I agree with you. You're like, why would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing about for me is like, anybody can. He shouldn't have said it because he hasn't had a lot of success, right? But he does have a 30 home run season on his ledger. So, and what works for one guy doesn't necessarily work for other guys. JD Martinez kept like a detailed log of every single one of his plate appearances. I feel like Miguel Cabrera did not watch video.
He didn't need to.
Yeah, but and I'm sure there are other guys who don't like to watch video, or some guys like to take live BP. Some guys like to hit off tees. It's and he didn't say it, but the Tigers may have given him tons and tons of stuff in the past to try. We've heard as much, and he's never really been into that. But maybe he did try some stuff and just did not like it at all. I don't know. It's his career. It's his life. If he's not comfortable trying something different, I get it. But yeah, at a certain point, like, I feel like you need to try just about everything. And I go back and I think about, when they signed him, if I were in the process of trying to figure out if the number one overall pick is the right guy, I always feel like, and I don't know if you'd get a true answer, but you'd have to ask these kids, like, so what happens if what you're doing doesn't work? What are you going to do about it? Like, how do we fix that? And just trying to get an answer, because adjustability is the name of the game, right? Like, they're always going to find your weaknesses, and you always have to readjust. And that's always been my concern with him is even when he finds it, it's usually after about 2 months of struggling. Yeah. And then it goes away again.
Well, it's like the league is going to make adjustments to you, so you have to make adjustments to the league. And if you're unwilling to do whatever you can do in your power in order to do that, you're not going to have sustained success anyway.
And in kind of self-scouting, right? Knowing before the other people know, like what you need to work on, what's not your strengths. And that's, it's very tough. I'm somebody who's terribly unaware. I have no self-awareness whatsoever. And other people do. And it's, sometimes it's just the thing you have, but I don't know. Yeah.
Didn't you say he added a toe tap?
No. Yeah. I think Raj had heard that they had him adding a toe tap to just do something, get a little bit more athletic, a little more movement in his swing or beforehand. Who knows? I mean, that's about the smallest thing you can do, I think. Yeah. But we've seen small changes help.
Now again, spring training stats, we can't get wrapped up in them. I totally get it. But for him, I mean, he needs, to show something. Historically, his spring numbers have been putrid.
Yeah.
And that might be giving putrid a bad name, but they've been bad. There's no way to spin it. And he's gotten off to slow starts in April as well. So he's going to need, he's not changing his approach, obviously, from technology standpoint. He needs something to change because he, unless he wants to be the opening day first baseman in Toledo, he needs to have a big spring.
Yeah, and that is kind of one of the interesting roster battles, if you will. If not, you don't have to worry about losing these guys, but how it ultimately does play out. Like, they've kind of anointed Colt Keith the first baseman, but what happens if he goes out and has a really bad spring training and Tork is tearing the cover off the ball? It's like, Do you send Colt Keith to Toledo? I don't like to think about that. I think that he's one of the things I do like about Colt Keith is he's always seemed to be able to adjust. So I wouldn't worry too much about a bad spring training performance. But you got Malloy involved. He's taking grounders at first. Who knows what happens? I've thought about all the different, like Gleyber Torres kind of is infamously doesn't want to play other positions, but I could see a scenario where he's playing shortstop at some point.
There's only so many DH at bats to divvy up with these guys too. So
and I don't think you want Kerry Carpenter playing in the field every day. Not that he's he's turned out to be an okay defender. It's just like you want to try to keep that guy healthy as
much you can.
Yeah.
Well, so they are replacing a lot of their DH at bats. I'm sorry, I thought I had it in front of me. Give me a second.
Right.
I'm so sorry.
No problem. Yeah, somebody here in the comments said that Colt would be a pretty highly paid mud hen, but so is Torkelson. Torkelson got $8.5 million bonus.
Yeah.
I think Keith is making what, $3 million, $4 million this year?
No, this would be Torkelson's final option year, right?
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people want to get rid of him. I mean, there's no sense to me to get rid of him. He's at his low point. You might as well stick him in Toledo and hope for the best. But
give it one last hurrah. There's nothing wrong with that. Hey, we said before, maybe he's a guy who figures out late, like Phil Nevin did.
I mean, I would love to see Torkelson, have another 30 home run season, right? That gives us so many options in the infield.
It's exactly what they need.
Yeah.
It's like oh, Torkelson comes out and hits 35 home runs this year. It's like, well, the offense is fixed.
Yeah.
But
Would be nice.
I don't know.
And, they had a historic run last year, and Spencer Torkelson was the first baseman.
Yeah.
He has another bad spring, though. I feel like I'm going to have to take a break from Twitter. Everybody's going to lose it.
Yeah.
Or mute his name or something.
Yeah. Mute function is nice.
Welcome back, Roger.
I've muted Alex Bregman now.
Shout out to the Crunch Time podcast there for having me on.
Gotcha.
That's what was going on. They were the scheduling. There's always a scheduling conflict with that, but I work with those guys over Woodward Sports and Jeff and Lucas and I'm trying to look right now.
That's good.
Those guys are just Crunch Time. They're good people. So, but so what we talked about?
Well, we've touched on a lot of Bregman. We talked about Brebbia. We talked about we briefly talked about the guy that they got from the Rays, the Summers. And we've been talking about Torkelson lately about what's going to happen at first base and just kind of making the rounds here, spring training. It's nice to see some video leaking out.
Yeah, the Torkelson. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think one of the things we were talking about, you and I, Chris, was that we heard that he had a toe tap.
Yeah, Ashley just brought that up. Yeah, you'd heard that, and we were discussing his comments, right? Like the ones where that's kind of the self-aware, like I haven't been good, and the other ones that didn't seem quite so self-aware about not wanting to try anything. But yeah, I don't know. One way or another, this may be over next year.
Yeah, I think with one of the things that I thought with the Cardinals too, or not necessarily the Cardinals, but like I thought a team like the Pirates, like we've heard the Pirates were interested in Torkelson or what have you. I really defensively, in terms of defensive metrics, Colt Keith got better defensively, believe it or not. He started the year as one of the worst, and then he got better. So his defensive metrics are actually better indicated. I think what's going to happen here is how is it going to grade out with guys like Torres, and that's another kind of thing where he plays second base, and that's the only position he plays.
Yeah.
So
he's not very good at it either.
No, he was the worst last year, I think. But
did you say specifically he didn't want to play shortstop?
Correct.
I don't think he said shortstop. I think he said third base.
Third base, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he played shortstop early in his career, and I don't think it would go great. But he's done it before, so if it happens, it happens. And who knows what happens in the course of a baseball season? That we might see a lineup next year with Torg at first, Colt Keith at second, Torres at shortstop, and Young at third. Like, was it you that posted the video of Lee at third base?
Yeah, and I think Hyu Lee could play third just fine. I think he just some of the questions about his arm
Yeah.
You get over the first. I understand that's you can rather be apprehensive about that. But I thought the footwork was fine. I thought he made the routine. There was a double play. I put all the plays in there. He didn't have that much. He only had 5 or 6 games at third base last year before he got hurt. And I thought he was fine. I think that Lee is a guy. Is he a guy going to be full? Like, you know what? I'm going to put my flag out there. I'm going to put my London Tigers cap out there and say he is a third baseman. He can play third base just fine. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I think that Lee, there's times where I think his athleticism will serve him fine. I think that the biggest thing for him is just making plant throw. His throws are just as bad. His throws are bad. And that's something that Greg Gagnon mentioned on the broadcast before. It's just the throwing was inconsistent, but he can make the routine play.
Yeah. And a lot of times I feel like you can fix throwing, although we've seen instances where you can't. Winslow Perez, they never quite got there. And Willie Castro didn't get there while he was here, but he seems like a viable infielder now in Minnesota. So they figured something out there. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the only real question for me on his defense too, is will the arm work? Like, can he make the throws he needs to without completely ramping up and losing his accuracy? But I mean, that's definitely another option.
I mean, do you guys could he be a factor by August, or is he strictly 2026?
If he's coming up, if he goes to Toledo and he's hitting like he did in Erie, I could see him coming up for sure. And I'm trying to think if he needs to be added to the 40-man.
Yes, he would need to be added to the 40-man. He's a non-roster invite right now.
So December 25. He and Lorenzo are the two big.
In terms of Rule 5, I'm sorry.
Rule 5. So he needs to be added to the 40-man at some point next year or this year anyway. So it wouldn't shock me at all if we see him August, September.
Yeah, I mean, if they I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna say Ryan Kreidler is taking up a 40-man spot. There's a couple spots that he could take.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I thought that Kreidler was probably going to go if they signed Bregman. I thought that was. Yeah. But I think they don't mind having a guy in Toledo who they can call up to catch the ball at shortstop. That's basically all he's good for. Although he had a good spring last year too, right? He thought he should make the team, and he didn't, and he was bummed out, and then he kept getting hit by baseballs.
Yeah. He's a magnet. Always has been.
He couldn't hit anymore.
Yeah, and then then Andrew Navigato is another non-roster invite to camp, and he will probably get some consideration because he can play some multiple positions in the infield. So I don't know, like Navigato's a right-handed bat as well. He did lead the minor leagues in home runs last year for the Tigers. If that's worth anything, look, Navigato's number 21 on our prospect list for a reason. I think that, but he's on that level of 4A player right now. I mean, if he, that's where I would put him.
Yeah, and we talked about that weird aspect of him where he's got reverse platoons where he doesn't hit lefties for some reason. Yeah. He hit 21 home runs last year, and like 20 of them were against righties.
Yeah,
it's and it was like the same the year before. So who knows what's? But yeah, I mean he's there. I'm looking at the non-roster invitee list right now. Yeah, Navigato, Medris, Leonard, Lee.
The catchers because they always need catchers.
Yeah, there's always a whole boatload of catchers in camp because you got a whole boatload of pitchers too. I'm trying to remember the name of the dude who we thought was going to make the team last year. It was a reliever. He had he came from Asia, had a big arm. It was like and he had really interesting stuff, and then he had a couple nice outings, and then late in spring, I think he went back to Asia.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
He had pitched for the Rangers a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Like Nick Anderson or something like that.
I know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, he had 2 really good outings, and then
Drew Anderson.
Was that?
Do you remember this actually at all?
Transferred to the SS. This is from 2024. He's 35. This is what I got from April 26, 2024.
Yeah. I mean, he was. It's a spring training story. My whole point was like, weird things happen in spring training. You think a guy's going to make the team, and then you never hear from him again.
So here's a question I have for the crew. I know I've said many times, and I realize defense is important. Don't get me wrong. I know it is. but I've always said if you hit, you'll play.
Mhm.
Okay. How good does Jace Young have to hit this spring to have a gig on opening day? What does it need to look like?
So how does he? What's he need to hit in spring?
Well, I mean, does he need to be really showing some power?
Yeah,
Looking
no, absolutely. I
consistent?
think if he's out there looking like prime Adam Dunn, he's
Yeah.
got like 15 walks and 10 strikeouts and 8 home runs in spring training. I think you can live with that. Like, I don't ever believe that he will be better than below average on defense, just because I don't think he's got the athleticism for it. But you can live with that, and I think just based on some of the things the Tigers have done, I don't know if they care that much about infield defense. As I'm sure they care about it, right? Like you see them working with guys every day down into the field, but I think they value outfield defense a little bit more, because those mistakes lead to a lot more runs.
Yeah.
That's a good point, because George Lombard has done a good job of like just setting him up in terms of like the outfield shifted a certain way and the way they position themselves, correct?
Yeah, I mean, errors in the infield, if they come at a bad time, can lead to a bunch of runs, but generally speaking, it's probably just a one base error, unless you're throwing the ball into the stands or whatever. But yeah, if you biff a play in the outfield, it's a double or a triple, and so I don't know. I just based on signing Torres and having Keith out there and having Young and thinking that he could do it, like it just feels like they don't infield defense, whatever.
Yeah.
But,
I just wonder what the breakdown of games started between Vierling, Young, and Ibanez are at third base. I mean, are we going to see if Jace Young is hitting, is he going to get 75 to 80 starts at third base?
Yeah, it feels to me like if he makes the roster, it'll be a little bit more like what we saw at the end of last year, where he's in there against a right-handed pitcher for 2-3 plate appearances, and then if the Tigers are close or have a lead late, then he's on the bench and somebody else is playing third.
Ibanez, yeah,
or
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think he can still hit. I mean, I think the wrist injury really is. I mean, if you think about his swing mechanics too, and how he holds the bat, and how much he can generate torque with the way he swings the bat like that, I'm sure that had a lot to do with the lack of power last year. And so, either way, I think that he is a guy who can hit. And the one thing I didn't get a chance to say this, but I'm really surprised that the Tigers. If there's one thing about this offseason that I wish it's still the offseason until the season begins, but a trade for a player, like Mason Engler was traded, obviously, but I'm talking like a major league player, like a bat. Yeah. And that's where I thought the Tigers would be a little different, or Scott Harris would do something a little different this year with that. But that's the part where I was just kind of, but maybe there's something in the works. I don't know, but I thought that was the one thing about this offseason that lacked.
If there's not something in the works now, I almost wonder if they'll do something at the trade deadline for a big bat.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of see how the third base thing plays out, see how the offense does, and then act accordingly.
Yeah, and one of the big things there is that there's always a team around the trade deadline that was expected to be way better than they are, and they're like, well, like they're at a crossroads and like we need to rebuild or something, and they're ready to offload a good bat. They might also do a late, you see it a lot where they add somebody at the end of spring training. I think that's how they got McKinstry, right?
Yeah.
That sometimes see roster crunch for other teams, you take advantage of that. I don't know. Like trades. Just doesn't seem like Scott Harris's forte yet. Like he hasn't made a big trade, and I've, we do the fake trade pieces every now and then, and I've looked around and around trying to find a trade chip that made sense, an outfielder, a third baseman, and it just doesn't feel like there's anybody out there that really screams like that's the guy you go trade for, or you can go trade for, right? Like there are guys you'd love to trade for, like I've said before, they go get Jordan Westberg or whatever. But
I think a lot hinges too on just how Young does, right? If Young hits, you don't need to make a trade. Well, we probably would need another bat still, but like if Young does really well and he sticks at third base, then that covers that. So,
well, then Ashley, let me ask you this. The whole panel this. Imagine Justin Henry Malloy gets off to a torrid start. That's a dilemma. That's a good dilemma to have, isn't it? I mean, you're going to have. So the question becomes, how do you split at bats? I mean, I think the biggest concern with Malloy and Carpenter is how healthy Carpenter is.
Yeah, I'm worried about his back. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Then Malloy goes to first, and then what happens to Cole?
I think if Malloy looks competent at first base, that's a big boost, right? Because he doesn't really. I mean, you can kind of throw him in the outfield. You can DH him a little bit.
He's positionless.
Yeah,
that's why I hope he sticks. He's positionless.
But yeah, I mean, he would be a boon to the offense too, as a guy who's, he really looked good at the end of the year and in the playoffs, right? Or it was he was putting together some good plate appearances, so they have those options. I don't know. It's hard to project.
Having a lot of guys performing well is a good problem to have. So I hope that we have that problem.
Yeah, or for that matter, what was it? What if Cole Key's throwing at third right now, somewhere secretly in the field somewhere?
Well, if they fixed his shoulder or whatever, that would. I mean, that's another thing where it would fix a lot of problems. But
sure would. The thing about every team has variance, right? But the Tigers, especially with such a young roster, and still with a lot of players on the way up and are kind of unproven, just forget about the hot streak to end the year last year. Okay, just forget that existed. Let's say they played 500 ball through that, which a lot of us probably expected they would, or maybe not even, right? That's how amazing what they did at the end was. But they have all of these young players who we can't automatically assume, well, that guy is good for, he's going to hit 265 and he's going to have 25 home runs and blah, 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 blah. We don't know anything about so many players on the Tiger roster. The offense, as it sits right now, could be a league average or better offense if enough guys have their breakout or at least just show incremental progress. But conversely, if a couple of these guys are really quiet as young players, as their development stage gets prolonged, it could also be ugly again, like it's been in some past years. So I just don't know if that one trade fixes everything. I don't know, and I also just don't know who you move.
And they still don't have the depth to survive, like what happened last year when Greene and Carpenter went out. Like it was like, oh, they're never going to score again. And it helps that Meadows seem to break out a little bit, and you bring in Torres, so that helps. So they may be able to stay afloat a little longer, but everybody's kind of just at the mercy of injuries and variance, like you said. So
I think everybody's so young too. Like it's such a young team that you don't there's not even 2 years of major league experience with most people to kind of, well, I think he'll do this, or well, I think he'll do that. It's like everything's kind of up in the air.
Yeah, and that's where I think the biggest thing to me that will happen in the spring training next, and look, baseball's back. I'm just happy baseball's back.
Yeah.
Period. That's all I care about right now. The one trade, I think, you brought this up and it is correct. I don't think the trade solves everything. However, what does solve things are spring training battles. And that's something that there's a lot of competitive, you have bullpen spots. You have the fifth spot rotation now up for grabs. Cobb's injury could be one of those things that hobble him for maybe longer than that. They're saying until he's not going to pitch until May. Who knows? Maybe a guy like Hyder Montero could get an opportunity to step up. Matt Manning could be returning form. I don't know. I mean, anything is possible. But it is one of those. That's what I like about this. Is the first time in a while in terms of spring training where there is a lot of interesting storylines. Not to say there's not interesting storylines in the past, but there's a lot of them where it's Mitch with the Whit Merrifield suggestion. That's not a bad way to go, and he is a Tiger killer, and his numbers at Comerica Park career wise are pretty good. That's not a bad possibility. I don't mind that either. So but that being said, I think that there is some very good, the Tigers have some young players that are challenging for positions, and that's something that we could not have said in the past. So one last final question here, and that's from Sam. Can we have a Riley Greene conversation? His production has been put on the back burner because of free agency frenzy and Torkelson Tarek win this Cy Young. What's his realistic ceiling this year? Because I hope to be bullish on Riley this season. Chris, you go ahead. We'll go first.
A healthy Riley Greene playing 155 games has, borderline MVP ceiling. I think, you're talking 5-6 WAR, a guy who could hit you 30 home runs and bat 260 to 280. He walked a bunch more last year. He lifted the ball more. He's been playing great defense in left field. You keep him healthy. And what is he? He's going to be 24.
Yeah.
Once he turned 24, he's 24 right now. He turns 25 at the end of September. So this is age 24 season. These next 3 years should be just outstanding for Riley Greene. Like this is a baseball player's prime. We've seen him improve every year. We've seen him win games for the Tigers. What was the game against Tampa last year? I think he hit 2 home runs. It was basically all their scoring. Yeah, I mean, I think the realistic ceiling is top 5 MVP finalist, if not top 3.
What about you, Uper?
I was going to say a 5 WAR season, something like that. Yeah, and he could probably go higher if he stays on the field. You can't predict injuries except for with him. You kind of have been able to predict at some point there's going to be an injury. I don't know how they get around that. I just hope that they can get him the rest he needs at times. And, maybe they tell him, diving for balls is out. But I think that it's going to be an ongoing discussion from now until the next couple of years. Can they get Riley Greene extended? I think he's shown that he's good enough and has enough ceiling where they can invest if they want to. Now the question is, does he want to?
Yeah, good question. That's very good. I mean, that's a question that you want to continue the narrative that Detroit's a good place to be. That, I just spoke of at the top of the show. Ashley, what about you?
I kind of agree with what everybody else said. I was thinking like a 30 home run, 5 WAR, 150 WRC plus season. Honestly, I could see it. All-star again. Continues improving defensively. I don't really have much different to say than you guys did. That's what I see from Riley. And I think as far as him wanting to stay here, I feel like we have to make that winning culture and we have to make it a place for him to want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good point.
Because a top 5 MVP finalist wants to be in a winning culture, I would assume.
Yeah. I forgot that he's a 4 WAR to Fangraphs last year, but was 5+ WAR to Baseball Reference last year. So he's already kind of at that level. That's all some defensive disagreement. The thing, you always worry because he's just constantly diving. And the other thing that only worries me is that he's just such an explosive rotator. Like the hip and shoulder separation, he's like an owl. Like his head will be facing behind him after he swings at times. Reminds me of my old GI Joes when I was a kid that were kind of like on a rubber band and you could twist them. And so I worry a little bit about that just because it's, you got to be really limber to do that. But he's 24. Like, he should be able to stay healthy. I don't know. Yeah, I think the sky's the limit with that guy.
Yeah, I look, if he avoids the Brian Buxton injury train, then I'm fine with that. I mean, that's where, in terms of just kind of impactful outfielder we're talking about, I compare him in the sense of just Brian Buxton, when he's healthy, is very good, very dangerous, very quick down the line. It makes incredibly good contact. But if he repeats what he did last year with a little more power, then Tigers should be in business.
Well, I think, and let me get my 2 cents in here. I just think that with the way he was injured last year, I feel like he played more DH than he'll probably play this year. And with him being a positive defensive player, you're going to get more opportunities to, get that WAR up really in that kind of way too. So I don't even think, I really think over 5 WAR, it's not, expecting is not necessarily the right word, but I think that if Riley continues on the projections that he's going, I think he'll blow past that on Fangraphs. I think that if he can get up to 150 WRC plus or maybe 155, somewhere in there, that'd put him top 10 in the entire league for minimum 250 at-bats. And I do not think that that's outside of the realm of possibility. So I think that ultimately that's my ceiling for him, which would ultimately make him a top 10 offensive player in the league. maybe I'm overshooting a bit, but I think the tools are there if he could stay healthy all year.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So thanks so much for watching this evening. We appreciate it. And again, if you can, go to our website, tigersmlreport.com. We have our prospect reports out. Chris just launched his 20 through 16. And the rest of them, I believe tomorrow will be 15 through 11. And then the Highly article that I did and the Tigers feature at third base is there as well. All great content is there. And also, again, if you want to donate to the GoFundMe link, there's in there. And the Patreon, I've been putting content there every day, and I will continue to do that. And there's going to be a Lakeland roster finishing up the depth chart. I was working on it last night before the whole Bregman thing happened. So, Ashley, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me.
And and Ashley did a short for us. She did a video on Tommy Caney, or is it Caney? Did I say that right? Caney. Thank you. And there's going to be some more shorts to come, and from Mike and Uper and myself. So thanks so much. Keep it classy. We'll talk to you guys soon.